Alleluia, 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 Alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. After making the crossing to the other side of the sea, Jesus and his disciples came to land at Gennesaret, tied up there. As they were leaving the boat, people immediately recognized him. They scurried about the surrounding country and began to bring in the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. Whatever villages or towns or countryside he entered, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch only the tassel on his cloak. And as many as touched it were healed. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So we get to start going through the beginning, right? The book of Genesis. Genesis it literally comes from the Hebrew word to begin, or the Greek word to begin, sorry. And we're going to be hearing about this over the next few weeks. And there's some significant things to take note of as we hear these famous words of the creation story. Right? First of all, we all know, right, as Catholics, we don't take every book of the Bible literally. Right? So the Bible is full of different kinds of books that are different kinds of genres, right? And we don't take them all literally. Right? Sometimes there are metaphors, sometimes there is symbolic language, sometimes there's even hyperbole or exaggeration. So when it comes to the book of Genesis, we don't really get involved in the debates that some Christians get involved in, right? Where they try to treat the book of Genesis like a science book. Right? The book of Genesis, it's written by Moses, and he was telling this story, right, just before the Israelites were getting ready to enter into the Promised Land. And he was trying to get them caught up on the whole story of how they got to where they were. And so you have to have that in mind when you're reading the book of Genesis. Right? Why did Moses think these details in particular were significant? Most likely, Moses was not telling the story of the creation to give an apology against evolution, right, or something like that. That's not what he was interested in talking about. Right? So the book of Genesis is a theological work, and there are certain points that are made in this story. Right? So starting in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. The word for God creating the heavens and the word is the Hebrew word bara, which is only used in the scriptures for when God creates something. When man would create something, a different word is used. And it's to make a distinction, the fact that God was creating something out of nothing, out of thin air, you might say. When human beings create things, we create it from other things that already exist. Only God has the power to bring something out of nothing, out of thin air. Right? In fact, the words abracadabra, right, it actually comes from this Hebrew expression. So kind of an interesting fun fact there. Right? God created the heavens and the earth was a formless wasteland, where it was formless and void, as other translations will say. Right? The Hebrew for tohu vabohu, right? So God takes what he created, and then he gives it shape and form and direction. God is the one who brings order out of chaos. He's the one who brings light out of darkness. He's the one who gives direction to those who are lost. In our faith, oftentimes we try to talk about this order that God brings. The word hierarchy, for example, that we use in the church. it comes from this idea of order, that there needs to be order in the church and order in creation. One of the characteristics of our modern age is to try to bring disorder into things that had previously been considered ordered. But God is the one who brings order. You may notice that whenever I have Mass, one of the things I try to emphasize is the order to the Mass. One of the sad things that happened in the 60s and 70s and 80s in the church is that we started building churches that seemed to portray disorder. There was no symmetry, for example, in many sanctuaries. Even the order of importance was obscured. Some churches, instead of having the tabernacle in the center of the sanctuary, some places would have the ambo or the presider's chair. It's not properly ordered. God is the one who brings order and shape to our existence. We also read that on the third day, God separated the waters from the land. Again, this idea of the waters, right? We hear about how God separated the waters from the sky from the waters of the earth. That's kind of a Hebrew phrase, right? The Hebrew word for the sky is related to the Hebrew word for water. So that's why it's called the waters in the sky and the waters in the land. And something that's interesting when it talks about the third day, about the creation of the land, notice it says that God brings the land up from the abyss of the water. So we might think that when God created the land, it's like he placed the land in the water, but it's actually the waters separated so that the land could come forth. And if you notice when you read the story of Noah and the flood, it's not so much that the water comes down from the sky, as much as there are holes in the ground that are separated and water comes up from below. It's a Hebrew way of saying, it's Moses' way of saying, that God in the beginning brought order out of the chaos. Water is kind of a mysterious thing, especially before the days of the Discovery Channel and submarines and all that stuff. Right? The abyss of the waters was kind of a scary place for the Hebrews. And so in the flood, you see that even though when God created the world, he brought this order from the chaos, the land up from the water, from the abyss. In the flood, the land begins to disappear, right? And the chaos returns. This is one of the images that Moses is trying to get us to see as we read the story of creation. And lastly, significantly, on the fourth day, you notice that even though throughout the days of creation, there's this rhythm of the evening came and morning followed. On the first day, God created the light and separated from the darkness. But it's not until the fourth day that he creates the sun and the moon. It's kind of a hint to us that the story is not to be taken exactly literally. The sun and the moon don't come until the fourth day. So these and other things are things that we can take note of as we start our journey through the book of Genesis.